She lived in a small, crowded apartment on the edge of the city. The walls were thin, and the sounds of traffic mixed with the chatter of neighbors drifting through her room. Even with all the noise and the chaos, she found moments of quiet when she sat at her piano. It was old, worn, and had a few keys that stuck, but it was hers. Every morning, before the sun fully rose and the city stirred, she would sit on the small bench and let her fingers find the familiar places on the keys. It was her escape, the one place where the world seemed to pause. She had discovered her love for the piano by accident. One day, a neighbor had left the apartment door slightly open, and she heard a melody floating down the hall. She followed it to a small upright piano in the living room of another apartment. The music made her heart race. She didn't know what she was feeling exactly, but it was something strong and urgent. From that day on, she begged her parents to let her learn. Money was always tight, and lessons were expensive. But she was persistent. Every chore she did, every little favor she could offer, she used as a way to earn a few coins toward her dream. Her piano was not perfect. Some keys were yellowed with age, and others made strange sounds when struck. But she loved it because it was her own. She would clean it carefully, wiping the dust off every day, and she treated it as if it were a living thing. When she played, she poured everything she had into the music. Joy, sadness, hope, fear. All of it flowed through her fingers and into the keys. Her parents worked long hours. Her father was a mechanic, often coming home with grease-stained hands and a tired back. Her mother cleaned offices during the night, leaving the apartment early in the morning and returning just before dawn. The little girl was left to take care of herself, but she didn't mind. She liked the quiet. She liked the responsibility. And she liked the piano. It gave her a purpose, a reason to get up even on days when the world felt heavy. Sometimes, she would sit at her window, listening to the city waking up. The clatter of buses, the voices of children heading to school, the distant hum of construction. They all blended into a rhythm that reminded her of her music. She would imagine herself playing in grand halls, in front of people who had never seen her before. The thought made her nervous but excited at the same time. She would practice late into the night, trying to make the sounds in her head come out through her fingers. At school, she was quiet and reserved. She didn't have many friends, but the ones she did have appreciated her gentle nature. She often carried a notebook filled with scribbled notes about music, tiny sketches of pianos, and little reminders to practice certain pieces. Other children would tease her for being different, for spending so much time alone, for always carrying her notebook. She didn't mind. She had her music, and that was enough. Her teacher, an elderly woman who had once been a pianist herself, noticed her dedication. She would sometimes stay after classes to teach her small tips, correcting her posture, showing her how to place her fingers just right. But lessons were rare. Money was tight, and even a few hours of instruction were a privilege. Yet, each moment with the teacher was treasured. She listened carefully, repeated the exercises, and went home to practice until her fingers ached and her eyes were heavy with sleep. There were moments when she felt frustrated, moments when the piano didn't sound like it should, moments when she wanted to give up. But then she would remember the music that first captured her heart. The way it made her chest tighten, the way it made her feel alive. She would sit back down, take a deep breath, and try again. Each mistake became a lesson, each struggle a step towards something greater. One rainy afternoon, she sat by the window, watching the droplets race down the glass. The city looked gray and tired, but inside her room, the piano stood like a small island of hope. She pressed a key softly, then another, letting the melody flow slowly. It was a song she had been creating in her head for days, something that spoke of longing and dreams and quiet strength. She played until her hands were sore, until the rain stopped, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light across the worn keys. Her parents noticed the change in her demeanor. Even though they were exhausted, they could see the joy in her eyes, the determination in her posture. They didn't always understand the music, but they understood what it meant to her. They began to find ways to help. Her father would sometimes spend a little extra time cleaning and tuning the old piano, making sure it was ready for her practice. Her mother would bring home scraps of music sheets she found, and even if she couldn't play them herself, she knew her daughter would cherish them. Despite the challenges, the little girl kept dreaming. She imagined a day when her music could reach others, when her fingers could speak the words she didn't know how to say. She imagined a moment when someone important, someone with power and influence, might listen and be moved. It was a far-off dream, almost like chasing the clouds in the sky, but she held onto it tightly. At night, before sleeping, she would sit quietly in her room, her small hands resting on the piano. She didn't always play. Sometimes, she just imagined the notes, hearing them in her head, feeling the rhythm, the harmony, the emotion. It was enough to give her peace. And in those moments, she felt a quiet certainty that one day, her music would reach beyond her small apartment, beyond the noisy streets, beyond the city itself. One day, someone would hear her, and they would feel what she felt every time she pressed a key. Her story was one of patience, of quiet determination, and of a love so deep that it carried her through the hardest days. Each morning she would wake, each evening she would play, and each day she grew stronger, more confident, more ready for the moment when her music would finally be heard by the world. She didn't know when it would happen, and she didn't know who would listen, but she knew one thing for certain. She could play the piano, and she would keep playing, no matter what. The morning started quietly, with the sun barely lighting up the streets outside. She woke earlier than usual, her heart beating faster than normal. Today was different. She had heard about a local community event, a small gathering of people who wanted to encourage young talent in the area. It was meant to be simple, just a chance for children to perform, but she knew that among the audience would be people who could change a young life. She had no idea that she might meet someone who could open doors she had only dreamed of. Her mother had made a quick breakfast, barely enough time for a piece of toast before rushing to work. Her father was already gone to the mechanic shop, and the apartment felt emptier than usual. She took her music notebook and tucked it carefully under her arm. The notebook was filled with her scribbled notes, favorite songs, and little melodies she had invented on her own. Each page represented hours of effort, mistakes, and corrections. Each line was a small victory. She arrived at the community hall, a modest building with plain walls and a stage barely raised above the floor. A few other children were there, some practicing nervously, some already chatting with friends and family. She felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She found a quiet corner and set up her music sheet, checking the notes and rehearsing in her head. The sounds of other children playing made her stomach twist, but she tried to focus. This was her moment, and she wanted to give it everything. A volunteer called out the order of performances, and she listened carefully. Her turn was somewhere in the middle. That gave her time to observe the room, to see who was coming to watch. Among the audience, she noticed a few familiar faces from her neighborhood, encouraging smiles from teachers, and some strangers who seemed to carry themselves with an air of authority. One of them, a man in a dark suit, caught her attention. He looked serious, almost intimidating, but there was a sense that he noticed everything around him. She didn't know who he was, but she could feel the weight of the room's eyes on her. As the performances began, she watched the other children. Some stumbled over their notes, some played beautifully. She cheered quietly for them, hiding the flutter in her chest. Every time a mistake happened, she remembered the hours she had spent at home, alone with her piano, making the music right in her mind. She felt grateful for the practice, for the patience, for the tiny lessons she had learned without a teacher's hand guiding her at every moment. When her name was called, she felt her legs shake. She walked to the stage slowly, carrying her notebook like a shield and a treasure. The stage looked bigger than she imagined, and the lights made the room blur. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that made her hands tremble. Then, she placed her fingers on the keys. The old piano in the hall was not as familiar as hers at home, and some notes felt slightly different, but she adjusted quickly. She began to play. At first, the music was soft, delicate, almost hesitant. She closed her eyes, letting the melodies guide her fingers, letting the rhythm take over. Slowly, she gained confidence. The notes grew stronger, flowing with emotion she hadn't realized she could express. She remembered the songs she had imagined at her window, the melodies she had invented late at night. They merged with the music she knew from her lessons, creating something new and real. The audience began to listen more intently. The room was filled with a quiet that felt heavy and alive. The man in the dark suit leaned forward slightly, his attention fully on her. She didn't know who he was, but she felt as if the music spoke directly to him, telling him stories of her life, her struggles, her dreams. She kept playing, her fingers flying over the keys, her heart beating in rhythm with the music. The sounds filled the room, vibrating against the walls, wrapping around every person in the audience. Some faces showed surprise, others admiration, and some had tears brimming in their eyes. She didn't notice. She was lost in the music, in the connection it created. When she finished, the last note lingered in the air for a moment, and then the room erupted in applause. Her heart pounded, and she could hardly breathe. She looked up and saw the man in the suit standing, clapping slowly, deliberately. His expression was one of awe and emotion, as if he had witnessed something profound. The other children and parents were cheering, but her eyes were fixed on him. It was not applause she sought, but acknowledgement, and somehow she had found it. After the event, people came forward to compliment her. Some offered words of encouragement, others simply smiled warmly. But the man in the suit approached, careful not to startle her. He bent down slightly to her level and spoke kindly, asking her about the songs she played, about her piano, about how long she had been practicing. She answered shyly at first, then with more confidence as she realized he was genuinely interested. She could see that he understood her world, even if he lived far from it. He told her that he had been moved by her music. He said that it was rare to see someone so young convey so much feeling through the piano. He asked questions about her lessons, her home practice, her dreams for the future. She told him about her little piano at home, the keys that stuck, the hours she spent alone trying to perfect every piece. She talked about the songs she had made up, the melodies that played in her mind before they reached her fingers. He listened carefully, nodding, as if he was taking in every detail. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she realized that her music could do more than comfort her. It could touch people, it could reach someone she might never have imagined. The thought made her nervous but also excited. She wanted to play more, to share everything she had inside her. The man in the suit encouraged her, saying that talent like hers should not be hidden, that it deserved a chance to shine. She felt tears prick at her eyes, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Walking home, she replayed every moment in her head. The feel of the keys under her fingers, the sound of the music in the hall, the applause, the kind words of the man in the suit. It all felt like a dream. She held her notebook tightly, thinking about all the hours she had spent practicing, all the small victories and mistakes that had led her to this moment. She realized that the struggles, the lonely practices, and the endless patience had a purpose. They had prepared her for this day. Her parents were waiting when she arrived. They noticed the glow in her eyes, the way she moved with a new lightness. She told them everything, from the first note she played to the man in the suit praising her. They listened quietly, smiling and holding her hands. For them, this was more than just a moment of recognition. It was a sign that their daughter's dreams could stretch beyond the walls of their small apartment, beyond the streets of their neighborhood, beyond the limits they had always known. That night, she returned to her little piano at home. She played softly, letting the notes tell the story of the day. She didn't need an audience now. The music itself carried the memory, the emotion, and the promise of what was to come. She felt a sense of hope she had never known before, a feeling that her journey was only beginning. And as her fingers moved over the keys, she imagined the doors that her music could open, the people it could touch, and the future she could build one note at a time. She went to bed dreaming of possibilities, of stages and audiences, of melodies that could travel beyond her apartment. For the first time, she realized that her music was not just her escape. It was her gift, and it had the power to reach others in ways she had never imagined. That realization filled her with courage, with a quiet determination to continue, to grow, and to play her heart into every note, knowing that one day, someone might hear and understand the world she carried within her. The day of the next event came, and the little girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness she had never known before. She had been invited back to perform at a slightly bigger gathering. This time, the audience included more people from the community, local officials, and even a few well-known figures. The thought made her anxious, but she reminded herself of the feeling she had experienced the last time she played. She had felt the music, not just her fingers on the keys, and that had made a difference. She hoped she could feel it again. Her mother helped her pack her music sheets, making sure they were neat and ready to use. Her father, noticing the determination in her eyes, gave her a firm nod and whispered, "Do your best. Just play from your heart." It was all the encouragement she needed. She clutched her notebook, feeling the worn pages that held years of practice and imagination. Each note represented hours of effort, patience, and love for the piano. She knew that she could not let fear take over. Arriving at the hall, she noticed the crowd was larger than before. Children were rehearsing nervously, parents whispered to each other, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. She found her place backstage and took a moment to close her eyes, imagining the piano at home, imagining her fingers moving over the keys just as she had practiced. She breathed deeply, trying to calm the racing of her heart. She knew that this time, she had to let the music tell her story, not just play the notes. When her name was called, she walked to the stage slowly, feeling the wooden floor beneath her shoes. The hall looked different in the bright lights, seemed bigger, and the audience seemed to watch every movement. She climbed onto the small bench and looked at the piano. It was not hers, not the old one she had spent countless hours with, but it was still a piano, and it could still sing if she let it. She positioned her fingers on the keys, feeling the cool surface, and took another deep breath. The first note came out softly, almost shyly. She closed her eyes and let her hands move naturally. The melody began to flow, gentle at first, and then growing in strength and confidence. The audience grew quiet, the air seemed to hold its breath, and she felt as though the world had shrunk to the space between her fingers and the keys. Each note carried a piece of her heart, each chord a story she could not put into words. She played from memory, from feeling, from the countless hours she had spent imagining music in her small room. Halfway through, she looked up briefly and noticed the man in the dark suit sitting among the audience. She recognized him from before, the one who had clapped and praised her at the last event. His eyes were fixed on her, and she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. His expression was serious, yet there was a softness in the way he watched her fingers dance across the keys. It was as if he could see her soul through the music, and that thought gave her courage. She played a piece she had written herself, a melody that spoke of longing, dreams, and quiet strength. The notes rose and fell, creating images of the rainy mornings she had spent watching the city, of the nights she had imagined grand stages, of the small victories she had achieved in her room at home. The audience was silent, absorbed, feeling the music without needing to understand every note. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, some held their breath. She felt every reaction, though she did not look directly at them. The man in the suit's eyes glistened as she reached the crescendo, the moment where the music swelled with all the emotions she had bottled inside. Her heart raced, and her fingers moved faster, but with precision, with intent. She had practiced, yes, but this was more than practice. This was her life, her story, her struggle and hope transformed into sound. The piano seemed to breathe with her, responding to every thought and feeling. She could almost hear her own heart in harmony with the instrument. As the final notes faded, there was a brief pause, a moment where the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, the applause came. It started softly, then grew louder, filling the hall with sound. She opened her eyes and saw the faces of those around her, some smiling, some teary, some in awe, but her gaze went straight to the man in the suit. He was standing now, slowly clapping, and his eyes shone with emotion. She felt a rush of relief and pride. She had done what she set out to do. She had played not just the notes, but the music of her life. After she stepped down from the stage, people came forward to talk to her, complimenting her skill and the emotion she conveyed. She listened quietly, shyly, feeling a warmth she had not experienced before. And then the man in the suit approached her. He spoke kindly, asking her about the melodies she had composed, about the piano at home, about the hours she had spent practicing. She answered softly at first, then with more confidence as he listened intently, nodding and acknowledging every word. He shared that he had been deeply moved by her performance, that her music had touched something in him he had not felt for a long time. He asked about her dreams, about where she wanted to go with her music. She told him about her wishes to learn more, to play for others, to someday have a stage of her own. He encouraged her, promising that if she worked hard and stayed true to her music, doors would open. She felt a hope bloom inside her that she had not dared to imagine before. Walking home that evening, she thought about every moment of the performance. The feel of the keys, the melody she had created, the reactions of the audience, and the man in the suit who seemed genuinely moved. She realized that her music had power, that it could reach others, that it could tell her story even when words failed. She held her notebook close, feeling the worn pages and the notes inside. Each one was a reminder that dedication, patience, and love for what she did had brought her to this moment. Her parents listened as she recounted the entire day, her voice trembling at times with excitement and awe. They were proud, but more than that, they were relieved to see their daughter recognized for her talent, to see her spirit lifted by the appreciation of others. They held her hands, telling her how proud they were, and she realized that their support, even in small ways, had been a vital part of her journey. That night, she sat at her little piano at home, replaying the melodies in her mind and on the keys. She felt a connection between her old, worn instrument and the stage she had performed on. Both had been a part of her story. Both had allowed her to express herself. She realized that the music she created was not just for her own joy, but it could reach hearts far beyond her small apartment. The thought filled her with courage, determination, and a renewed love for her piano. She played late into the night, imagining the future, imagining stages, imagining people who might hear her and feel the emotions she poured into every note. She understood that this was just the beginning, that there were more challenges ahead, but she felt ready. Her music had been heard, her story had been felt, and for the first time, she believed that her dreams were not only possible, but within reach. Each note she played was a promise to herself, a promise to continue, to grow, and to keep sharing her heart through the piano. And as she finally lay down to sleep, she dreamed of the melodies yet to come, knowing that the world would one day listen and understand the music she carried inside her. The applause lingered in the hall long after the little girl's fingers had left the piano keys. People were talking quietly, whispering about the performance they had just witnessed. Some were still trying to understand the depth of feeling she had conveyed in her music, while others were simply shaking their heads in awe. But one figure stood out among the crowd. The man in the dark suit, the CEO, remained rooted in his seat for a few moments, slowly rising with an expression that was difficult to read. It was not just admiration. It was something deeper, something that tugged at emotions he had long kept hidden. The little girl stepped down from the stage, her heart still racing, her cheeks warm from the intensity of her performance. She had noticed the quiet awe in the audience, but it was the way the CEO looked at her that left her breathless. She had played with all her heart, but she hadn't imagined that it could touch someone so profoundly. As she made her way off the stage, she saw him waiting, and for a moment, her confidence wavered. Would he speak? Would he dismiss it as just a good performance? But then he smiled softly, and she felt a wave of relief wash over her. He approached her slowly, as if not to startle her, and crouched slightly so that he could meet her eyes. There was a kindness in his gaze that surprised her. He spoke in a calm, steady voice, telling her how moved he had been by the music she played. He asked her about the songs she had written herself, about the melodies that seemed to carry her soul across the room. She answered shyly at first, then with growing confidence as she realized he was genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. Each word he spoke was encouraging, and for the first time, she felt that her music truly mattered beyond her own enjoyment. He asked about her piano at home, about the hours she spent practicing alone, and the sacrifices she had made to learn. She described the old, slightly broken instrument she cherished, the sticky keys, the times she had stayed up late just to perfect a piece. He listened carefully, nodding, showing that he understood the effort and determination it took to reach this moment. There was no rush in his manner, no condescension, only genuine appreciation and respect. She had never encountered someone like him before, someone who could see beyond her age and background to recognize the depth of her talent and the strength of her dedication. As she spoke, she noticed his eyes glisten slightly, and she realized that her music had stirred something in him. It was not just admiration for skill. It was a recognition of struggle, hope, and the purity of expression. Her small hands had poured every ounce of emotion into the piano, and it had reached someone she had only heard about in stories. She felt a mix of pride and humility. It was an overwhelming sensation, but not frightening. It was the kind of validation that made all the lonely hours of practice, all the nights spent imagining music in her room, feel worth it. He then shared a story of his own, of times in his life when he had felt disconnected from joy, when work and responsibility had weighed heavily on him. He told her that her performance had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten: the simple, profound power of music to reach hearts and evoke emotion. She listened intently, feeling honored that someone of his experience and stature would share such personal reflections with her. She had never thought her music could bridge such a gap between worlds. Around them, the crowd began to disperse, but for a few moments, it felt as if time had stopped for just the two of them. She realized that this was a turning point, a moment she would never forget. Her music had not only been heard but had been felt deeply. She could see that her story, her dedication, and her talent had touched someone in a way that could potentially change her life. The realization filled her with a quiet sense of hope and determination. After some more conversation, the CEO expressed a desire to help her pursue her musical dreams. He spoke about opportunities to learn from professional teachers, access to better instruments, and ways to perform in settings where her talent could be appreciated by many. She felt a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The thought of having guidance, support, and resources that had previously been out of reach was almost overwhelming. Yet she felt ready. She had worked tirelessly to reach this point, and now there was a path forward that she could follow. Her parents, watching from a distance, were both proud and emotional. They had always known their daughter's dedication and talent, but seeing someone with the power to open doors recognize it so profoundly brought tears to their eyes. They felt relief and joy, knowing that the struggles and sacrifices they had endured were beginning to bear fruit. Their daughter was no longer just a talented girl practicing in a small apartment. She was someone whose music had touched lives and opened possibilities she had never imagined. Walking home that evening, the little girl felt the cool breeze on her face, a reminder of the city outside her apartment. Yet, inside her heart, she felt warmth and excitement that would not fade. She thought about the piano at home, the melodies she had written, and the new opportunities that awaited her. The day had changed something fundamental within her. She realized that her dedication, patience, and love for music had the power to create real change, not just for herself, but potentially for others as well. That night, she returned to her old piano, her hands moving over the familiar keys with renewed energy. She played softly at first, letting the emotions of the day pour into every note. Then, gradually, her playing grew stronger, more confident. She imagined the audience she had touched, the CEO who had listened so intently, and the potential for future performances. Each note was a promise to herself to continue, to grow, and to never stop expressing the emotions that music allowed her to share. She stayed at the piano long after the rest of the apartment was quiet. The room was filled with the sound of her music, carrying both the memory of her achievements and the anticipation of what was yet to come. Her mind wandered to the possibilities ahead. Lessons with skilled teachers, opportunities to perform in larger venues, and the chance to meet more people who might be moved by her music. She felt a quiet determination, knowing that this was just the beginning of a journey that could take her far beyond the walls of her small home. Her parents eventually called her to bed, but she lingered for a few more moments, savoring the feeling of accomplishment and hope. She realized that music had given her something far more valuable than recognition. It had given her a voice, a way to connect with others, and a reason to dream bigger. She promised herself that she would continue to play, to learn, and to share her music with the world, no matter the challenges that might come. As she finally lay down to sleep, she reflected on the events of the day. The applause, the kind words, the emotional response of someone so influential. It all felt surreal, yet it was real. Her music had moved someone deeply, and that was a feeling she would carry with her forever. She closed her eyes with a sense of peace and excitement, knowing that her journey was only beginning, and that each day would bring new opportunities to grow, learn, and inspire through the music she loved so dearly. The weeks that followed were filled with changes she had only dreamed of. The little girl's life began to shift slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but then more noticeably as doors that were once closed started opening. The CEO kept in touch, checking on her progress and arranging for lessons with skilled teachers who could guide her fingers and refine her technique. Each new lesson felt like a step into a world she had never imagined, a world where her dedication and talent were recognized and nurtured. She approached each session with seriousness and excitement, eager to absorb every bit of knowledge and to improve her playing. Her parents watched with pride as their daughter's world expanded. They had supported her quietly for so long, and now, seeing the opportunities unfolding before her, they felt a sense of relief and joy. They noticed the change in her demeanor. Her confidence had grown, her posture was taller, and her eyes sparkled with determination. The quiet girl who had once practiced alone in a small, crowded apartment was now stepping into spaces that could showcase her abilities to the wider world. Their hearts swelled with pride knowing that her perseverance and love for music were finally being recognized. The little girl spent hours at the piano each day, but now there was a new sense of purpose. She learned new techniques, explored more complex compositions, and began to experiment with her own creations, blending the music she had invented with the lessons she received. Her imagination expanded along with her skill, and every practice session became a journey of discovery. She no longer simply played the notes. She understood the emotions behind them, how each chord could tell a story and each pause could evoke feeling. The piano became more than an instrument. It was a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of those who listened. The CEO invited her to perform at a small charity event he was hosting. This was her first time playing for an audience beyond her community and family, and the thought made her nervous. She remembered the first time she had performed at the local hall, the way she had felt under the gaze of the crowd and the CEO's attentive eyes. Now she had to translate that same feeling to a new audience, larger and more formal. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked onto the stage, but she reminded herself of all the practice, all the determination, and all the love she had poured into her music over the years. As she played, she focused on the emotions rather than the mechanics. The audience responded to her music with silent appreciation, leaning in to catch every note, every subtle movement of her fingers. She could see some faces reflecting joy, others touched by the raw feeling she conveyed. The CEO watched closely, his expression softening as he remembered the first time he had heard her play. She realized that she could not only perform the music but also communicate the journey of her life through it. Each note carried her past struggles, her present dedication, and her hope for the future. After the performance, the CEO approached her with a warm smile. He praised her growth, her ability to express emotion, and the way she had captured the essence of the music. He spoke of potential opportunities to perform at larger venues, to meet other musicians, and to continue learning under guidance that could lead her toward a professional path. Her heart swelled with excitement and gratitude. She understood that this was not just a chance to play music, but a chance to create a meaningful life through her passion. Her parents were present, watching as she interacted with the CEO and other organizers. They felt an immense sense of pride, seeing their daughter transform from a quiet, determined child practicing alone into a young musician whose talent was appreciated and nurtured. They shared glances, smiles, and quiet tears of joy, knowing that their support and sacrifices had played a role in her journey. Every evening, when she returned home, she would sit at her old piano to practice, integrating the new techniques she had learned and improvising melodies that reflected her growing understanding of music and expression. Over time, the little girl gained more confidence in herself. She began to compose her own pieces, inspired by the life she had lived, the people she had met, and the emotions she carried. She experimented with rhythm, dynamics, and melody, creating music that was uniquely hers. Teachers and mentors encouraged her creativity, offering guidance without stifling her personal voice. Her compositions began to receive attention, small at first, but gradually reaching listeners who were touched by the depth and sincerity of her music. The CEO continued to support her, not just as a benefactor but as someone who genuinely believed in her potential. He arranged meetings with other musicians, invited her to workshops, and provided opportunities to perform in settings that would challenge and inspire her. She experienced new audiences, new environments, and the pressure of performing beyond familiar faces. But each experience strengthened her, teaching resilience, focus, and the power of music to connect hearts across different walks of life. Despite the growing recognition, she remained humble. She never forgot the long hours in her small apartment, the old piano that had been her companion, or the quiet moments when she had imagined grand stages from the corner of her window. These memories grounded her, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, patience, and love for the art were equally important. She continued to practice diligently, striving to improve while nurturing the joy and authenticity that had always defined her playing. Her community also celebrated her achievements. Teachers, neighbors, and friends were proud to see one of their own stepping into a wider world, representing hope, perseverance, and the power of dreams. She returned to her local hall to perform for familiar faces, sharing the music she had developed and allowing them to see how far she had come. The applause and smiles she received were meaningful, reinforcing the idea that music could unite people, tell stories, and create bonds that transcended social and economic boundaries. Over the months, the little girl's life continued to change. She received more opportunities to perform, more access to lessons, and more guidance from skilled musicians. She grew in skill, confidence, and understanding of music's emotional depth. But she also learned the importance of humility, patience, and staying true to her heart. She played not for fame or recognition, but for the joy of sharing what she loved, for the power of connecting with others through sound, and for the fulfillment of knowing that her dedication and passion could move hearts. Her parents saw a transformation not just in her music, but in her character. She had grown into a young individual who understood the value of hard work, the significance of opportunity, and the importance of gratitude. She became a role model for other children in her community, showing that talent and determination could overcome obstacles, and that persistence, passion, and love for what one does could create unexpected and wonderful opportunities. At night, she would sit by her piano and play softly, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the first time she touched a piano, the hours of practice in a crowded apartment, the community events, and the moment the CEO had first been moved by her music. Every note she played carried her history, her emotions, and her hopes, and she knew that her journey was far from over. There were still stages to play, new compositions to create, and countless hearts to touch with her music. As she closed her eyes, fingers resting on the keys, she felt a sense of peace and excitement for the future. She had learned that life could be unpredictable, that challenges could be overcome, and that passion and perseverance could create extraordinary possibilities. Her music had brought joy and emotion to others, had opened doors that once seemed impossible, and had become a bridge between her dreams and the world around her. The little girl's journey was a testament to the power of persistence, dedication, and love for one's craft. From a small, crowded apartment to stages where her music could be shared and appreciated, she had transformed not just her circumstances, but also the lives of those who heard her play. She had discovered that talent, when nurtured with patience and heart, could create ripples far beyond what she had imagined. And as she played into the night, she understood that this was just the beginning, that her music would continue to grow, reach new people, and inspire others, proving that dreams, when pursued with love and determination, could indeed come true.